Well, thank you, Rocio, and a very welcome for everyone joining this webinar. My name is Judith Kessens, and together with Frank Wubbels, we are coordinator of this project. I work at TNO as a senior project manager. And today I will kick off this webinar. We have several speakers which will be introduced after my presentation. And the introduction of each participant, of each speaker will be done before the presentation. So that will come later. What will we do? What's the program of today? First of all, I will introduce AMIGDALA project. Then we will have more details on the different expertises which are involved in this project. Then we will explain more about the community of practice and the next steps. And we will end with the question and answer session, as Rocio explained before. So then, what is the AMIGDALA project? The AMIGDALA project is called AMIGDALA Alliance for Modeling Industries Towards the Green Deal's Objectives and Circularity. And the reason for that is because within the Green Deal, we set the objective within Europe to become climate neutral by 2050. And this implies that the industry needs to change. It must become sustainable, but at the same time, it needs to remain competitive. And therefore, clean energy must be used, and circular materials need to become circular. And this means that there's a need for a system change. And this is a drastic change, and therefore it's quite complex. And the issue is that we need to act now. Well, therefore, we set up this project. You can go to the previous, what we do is we use models in order to employ insights in the consequences of decisions. So we look at decisions, how are they made by policymakers and how are they made by industry. And the computer models will provide insights into the consequences of the decisions made both by the policymakers and the industries. And in this way, we hope to find pathways of change towards the green transitions. So you can go to the next slide. This project is a European funded project. It's part of Research and Innovation Action. And we started this project January this year, and it will have a duration of 4 years. The overall budget is nearly 7 million euros, and 12 partners are involved. The main expertise that the partners bring in are decision analytics and user interaction, energy and process technology, scenarios and modeling, dissemination, exploitation and communication, and project management. You can go to the next slide. In order to provide the transformative solutions and to make industrial production in Europe climate neutral and competitive, we take an iterative approach in our project. We will start at the user perspective, and by performing interviews, we will develop a first version of a decision framework. Next, we will develop scenarios, which will be implemented in a modeling framework of demand, industrial production, trade, and climate impact. And we will set out pathways of change towards climate neutrality, and we will determine the conditions for market uptake. So in this way, we do a cycle, and we will do it 3 times. So we will first start with the design phase, then we will go to the proof of concept, and finally we will do the technical realization. And as you can see, indicated by the expertises, 4 expertises are interconnected within this project. First of all, the decision framework or decision analysis. Second, scenario development. Third, modeling expertise. And in order to get there, of course, we need a lot of data and expertise on data. The expertises and more details on the expertises will be explained by the leads in the subsequent presentations. You can go to the next slide. So the outcome of this project is an integrated modeling framework embedded in a decision framework. And we will also have transparent and verifiable pathways of change towards the Green Deals. We will develop scenarios of public and private decisions, and of course the conditions for the transformative solutions in order that they will be realistic and so, for instance, investable. And then finally, of course, we will enhance knowledge about climate neutral pathways, both for academia and industries. In this way, we will have the following impacts: a climate neutral supply chain for sustainable products, a competitive production in Europe, and a resilient value chains. And our approach is unique because we will present our results in actionable terms for users. So in this way, we are closing the loop between abstract results and actual decisions. So what we do is we design around these decisions by taking the actual users in the loop. We build on recognized models, and we engage for impact by having this decision maker from the beginning of the project involved in order to maximize our impact of our project. So that's the end of my presentations, and more details on these different expertises will be explained in the following presentations. And I think the order is a bit different. I think we start with decision framework by Green Decision, and then we go to the scenarios explained by Vito, and the integrated modeling from framework of Tino, and the data by Decama. And well, we like to involve you in this project. You can contribute. This can be done by being part of this community of practice. This will be explained at the final presentation. We like you to contribute to this project by giving input, so you can shape our approach. You will be able to exchange ideas across industry and policy areas. And in this way, we will ensure that the model and approach that we develop fits to your needs. Yeah, I think this is the end of my presentation, and I like to give the floor to Alex Sabeo from Green Decision on the decision framework.
Thank you, Judith, and good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Sabeo. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Green Decision, which is an SME located in Venice, dedicated to decision analysis and sustainability assessment, basically. We can go to the next one. So, the state of the art of what we have to develop as a decisional framework is relying on goals, user preferences, and control parameters. So these are the different decision criteria we need to take into account. And the idea is to help in meeting the Green Deal objectives from the European Union, which involve the policymakers and the industrial higher level decision makers. So there are several challenges to overcome to make this decisional framework. First of all, there are differences in the decision-making approaches according to the categories of decision makers. We need to understand the preference profiles of the decision makers. We need to identify the key control parameters, the output variables, and all the mathematical related stuff, and design an approach that meets the objective of the decision makers that we want to have in the tool. Next one. So we've been starting the project already. So we have our ideas about the decisional framework methodology, which is under preparation. and we already defined the contents. So the main categories of information we will have in this framework. So the different alternatives, the assessment criteria, the categories, and so on. So the thing that we already know is that the system is based on the assessment of forecasted conditions. So it will allow the decision makers to see what happens, what we think could happen in the future according to the models, to change some control levers and see what happens to the results by utilizing some indicators that have been selected. And so this also brings pathways to that shows how things develop according to the models. Next one. So there has been also a series of interviews with some decision makers already made. So there were policymakers and industrial agencies that have been interviewed. So there are differences among these two typologies of decision makers. This is mostly because of the different responsibility. So if we look at the industrial decision making, we see that most decisions are driven by the economical part. So what the raw material and energy prices, how will they change, the emissions, how should they change, the technologies to be used, the market perspective. So these are the things that are most interesting for the industrial part. And also there is they want to understand how the EU is going in the future, so that this direction can also drive their decisions. So the two decision makers are a bit interconnected. And next one. So there are wider considerations if we look at policymakers, and then this also introduce uncertainties. So that the industrial policy decision maker needs to take into account, like the willingness to pay, the social acceptability, and all the related stuff, and the different policy objectives that are from the European Union that can change the future scenarios. Of course, policymakers have a broader view of the problem. So to take into account the objectives of the European Green Deal. So they want to be sure about the economic coherence, the impact that their decision will have on the value stream at country level, and the circular economy objectives they can get, and how overall the quality of life can be impacted by their decisions. So the use of this decisional tool is different according to the different decision makers. Next one. So there are still lots of open questions because we are still in the beginning of the project. So we know that we have indicators, constraint goals, background and foreground scenarios, but we need to understand exactly which indicators are meaningful, which constraints make sense, which goals represent the European Union goals, the background and foreground scenarios, so they need to be realistic according to the situation of the world. And of course, we need to decide which are the best user interface widgets, so how the system should look like to be user-friendly and to be, for the complex information we are delivering to be easy to understand. So the added value of the community of practice is in deciding these details, more basically on the definition of the proper indicators, and of course in the selection of the best user interface. So how the users, the decision makers would like to see the results in order to take their decision in an informed way. And next one, but I think okay. So we have the next steps. Now By the end of the year, we will define the methodology completely. So the mathematical part, let's say, will be defined, and all these indicators and control levers will be decided. And in the next 2 years, we will create a simplified testing environment in different versions, always evolving, and that will take into account the ideas that are coming out also from the community of practice. So keep in mind that this tool should be beneficial both for policymakers and industrial associations, which can use it in different ways to understand what the possible future can be and how to impact the future if you're a policymaker. And companies and practitioners can understand how likely are things to be, and so where should they put their money or make their investments in the future. And I think that was the last one. Okay, so thank you, and I leave the floor to Wouter.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Wouter. Within AMIGDALA, I lead the expertise on scenarios. I work for Vito. Vito is an independent research organization working on clean tech mostly. And Vito will support in AMIGDALA clarifying how process industries can become climate neutral and how we can reduce market barriers and identify framework conditions that are needed to get there. Apart from our scenario expertise, Vito will also bring in expertise on industry sector modeling and electricity and energy systems analysis. Before explaining the details here, I wanted to give a bit of my thoughts on scenarios in general, and scenarios are really important to within the project. So we live in a European Union with a clear ambition for 2050, and there are a number of pathways showing how to get there. But still, we feel a bit lost. We feel lost on getting the right data out of these EU scenarios. We feel lost on the directions to take, the first steps to take, and on filtering facts and opinions. So in the middle of this overwhelming information, conflicting opinions, scenarios can actually provide guidance, especially for industries. And scenarios allow us to deal with uncertainties. So on the state of the art and challenges. So with this slide, we want to explain mostly how AMIGDALA will go beyond state of the art. So on the left, we explain the typical, the way typically scenarios are constructed, and we have the same elements. However, we provide for each of these approaches like a new variant and how we go beyond state of the art. So to start, we have background and foreground scenarios that we will construct. Background is like you're not in control, whereas foreground scenarios include elements that we can influence. And within AMIGDALA, we want to have those scenarios, but we also want to have actionable control options. So we go a bit beyond the typical foreground scenarios. The whole idea is that the impact of AMIGDALA is to reduce and identify these market barriers. So basically, how can we make it happen? On the second, we go beyond energy and emissions because we will cover material flows, carbon flows, because of, as already introduced by Judith, the idea is to increase the level of circularity, reduce the dependency of foreign energy and or material imports. Of course, there's a bit of balance. So in other words, to increase our strategic autonomy. We want to target all stakeholders together, and we want scenarios and pathways that provide more detail than typically is given. So for industries, we want to go at the level of subsectors so that we can identify how does competitive production look like for a specific industry subsector. Finally, at a later stage in the project, we want to look external, and we will compare our own scenarios with external scenarios, because we're well aware that other projects and other regions in the world are all focusing on this important topic. The next slide. It's a graph. With this slide, I mainly want to explain the role of the expertise scenarios within AMIGDALA. It's in the middle of the slide. And so scenarios should reflect these use of control options of governments and industry stakeholders that come from the stakeholder interactions. That's the arrow going from the first box to the second box. And this will allow us to define or improve the definition of our foreground scenarios. The interface with the decision framework is of key importance because the control levers need to match the stakeholders' perspective. Then on the right, we have the integrated models. Models are the key tools to substantiate the pathways. So with the highlighted yellow, I wanted to make the difference between and show the flow, how we go and combine elements from background to foreground, and then in the end into pathways for the different industries. And for all that, we need proper data. Next slide, please. So this is a representation of a bit of the coverage of AMIGDALA. So on the horizontal axis, you see the timeline going from 1990 to 2070. And that's actually the time horizon for AMIGDALA. So, and that's relatively new, I would say. Like there's only limited official scenarios that cover up to 2070. I think only the Clean Planet for All was going up to that time frame, and we want to go there as well. On the vertical axis, you see any dimension covered within AMIGDALA. It could represent the amount of electricity used by households or whatever. And then you see what is a pathway. A pathway is an actual outcome of a scenario, and it can depend on the scenario. Depending on the scenario, it will have different evolution in time. Next slide. The work in progress. So basically, currently, we are establishing sound interfaces, and we are comparing on how on the best way to construct background scenarios. There's a way to do it bottom up. There's a way to do it top down. Based on stakeholder inputs, we want to understand what are key missing factors for industrial transformation. For example, we know we can produce sustainable materials, but will there be a demand for it? And how large will be that demand? How will the demand for sustainable materials be created? We already answered some questions within the project. We fixed the idea that we want to connect the scenarios with the stakeholders, and we also agreed that we will have to be explicit on opportunities, but also on regrets. A possible opportunity is new industries that will create our chemical products using recycled carbon or using biogenic carbon, whereas a possible regret are maybe products that are no longer produced within Europe. Key remaining questions, there are quite some still, and we want to especially get the questions right. So what is a concern? I give a few examples in the slides. What clusters are at risk? Should we import intermediate products? Is it complex or costly to have hydrogen pipelines? And how much carbon is needed for our materials production, feedstock? Carbon removal, which is the equivalent of having negative emissions, is up to today there's no incentive for it. So these are all a collection of questions, and we want to expand it so to make sure we have them on board, and that's also the link with the community of practice. Basically, the output of AMIGDALA will depend on your inputs, which is identify market and framework conditions. So we're very happy if via the community of practice we also get key concerns. Next slide, please, with the next steps and also my final contribution. So this year we will have defined background scenarios, and in doing so, comparing different scenario frameworks that are out there on the academic, but also in the industries. We will select a framework and make a selection of one of the background scenarios as a baseline. Then we have a qualitative definition of the control levers, like how we can influence the future. And in the long run, we will have, of course, then final and quantitatively defined these control levers, and have a full description of the scenarios and assumptions. So to summarize, scenarios are key within AMIGDALA to get the control levers into inputs for the modeling that will be described now by Toon van Harmelen. And what you can keep in mind from my talk and AMIGDALA is maybe easy to remember is the CCC. I've explained that AMIGDALA is there to define the conditions to make it happen, conditions for success, to get to a high level of circularity and to provide carbon flows of the future. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Wouter. Indeed, my name is Toon van Harmelen. Good morning. I work at TNO as a senior researcher on circularity and sustainability modeling. And I'm expertise lead within my AMIGDALA on integrated modeling. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I really like to summarize our challenge, and then not only in terms of, let's say, topics, but also in terms of modeling, of course. We face the following challenge, going from scenarios and policies, then integrate economy, energy, and materials in order to come up with pathways and market uptakes to transformative solutions for the process industry sectors. And we do that to become CO2 neutral, circular, and competitive. Again, 3 C's. And then, of course, with attention for the European Union here. And of course, there are all kinds of models available in this field. But let's say the challenge that I would formulate for this expertise is to go from a flock of models to an integrated framework. And we made a few steps already to go there. Next slide, please. First, to show you about the state of the art and the challenges that we face. State of the art with respect to current CO2 mitigation decision-making modeling is really energy focused. And it is really focused on certain domains, on sectors, but really with respect to energy. Materials and product circularity measures are generally lacking. And we could even say that these models are lacking. Furthermore, it is based on, let's say, a combination of macroeconomic models and techno-economic optimization energy models. And competitiveness is then simplified as, let's say, technology costs in general. And then maybe upgraded to the system costs, but that is about it. And behavior is rather static and or simplistic. For instance, least cost behavior. And we would like to improve on that. So the challenges are at the same time also the value added that we want to reach in this project. So first, on the right, include materials and circularity options. And then the whole range of options are strategies going from energy recovery and recycling to, in the end, refuse. Then we would like to integrate economy, energy, materials, and environment. And then not only CO2, but also the other environmental impacts. Then, you heard it before, we would like to align both the societal and the business perspective. And try to integrate that in the different types of models. We also would like to combine global, EU, member state, and local scale. And at the same time, have detail for all the process industry sectors. So I can say that I have spent some sleepless nights already on these challenges. At the same time, I'm very committed to try to make them work. Next slide. What have we already been doing at the moment? We have had a few workshops, and in the end, in August 2024, we are going to report. And then we have a first potential set of indicators for the decision making, and of course with input from the other expertises. But the models will have to produce these indicators. And at the same time, we're trying to develop a first framework of these models. And we have here a number of steps that we are taking in order to come up with this framework. Then key answered questions. At the moment, what is then the scope needed to investigate the CO2 neutral, circular and competitive industries? Then what model is needed in what capacity? And also which model receives what input to generate what output for other models, and in general for output for the study. Then it goes to types of output, but also the domain, the aggregation level in terms of time, but also geographical scope. This we want to get clear in the next month. Then key remaining questions are how and in what detail to specify all these processes in the industry, in the process industry sector. And then another thing is, a big thing, how to operationalize the whole model framework and to let these models cooperate in a consistent way, but then with different experts, and how to execute that with different types of software, different IP, etc. Then the added value for the COP is, please guide us in addressing your stakeholder needs, so that we have the right topics and that we address the right questions with our model framework. Next slide. This is a kind of a sneak preview, a first outline of the proposed model framework. You see on top scenarios, at the bottom you see key outputs, and in between you see a whole set of models, and they have been detailed at different levels. So we have the global level, the EU and the member state level, and at the bottom, local level. And at the same time, you see also on the right side, you see all kinds of models which are really good at optimizing the system, looking at least costs, usually with perfect foresight. So optimizing the whole period and coming up with optimal solutions, cost-effective solutions. And more on the left, you see forecasting simulation type of models, which sometimes find equilibrium, but let's say have a more realistic simulating type of approach in their models. Yes, then the idea is that we first, in our tiered approach, do kind of linearly, first the global, then the EU level, and then the local level, without too much iterations and feedback loops. And then in the next stage, we are going to introduce these feedback loops first at levels, and maybe later at the end, even between the different geographical levels. So just to introduce, at the global level, we have a macroeconomic model, XIOMOD. We have also an energy system model, global TIAM-ECN, and we have a land use model, GLOBIOM. When this is kind of run, then the global situation for the EU is clear, and then maybe you can press a button. Then we're going to solve at the EU level the models there. And there we have a new model called KIDS and PRISM. They are focused at materials and products and circularity. PRISM at recycling particularly. And on the right, you see the Times Europe model for Europe, but also for its member states on the energy system. Then these will be run together, and then will provide information also for the models at local level. There you have Calliope. It's an energy system model with more geographical and time detail. Also an agent-based model called Eldest, and SIMS model that is a chemical cluster model for the region of Camelot at the moment. So we have this order of, let's say, running the different models consistently. And we have a tiered approach in making it more complex by allowing more feedback loops. But first, we want to start simple in order to get this running. Next slide. So the key next steps, I already said it. This summer, we will have first design and a report on that. And after that, the proof of concept will start. We selected as a proof of concept the plastic value chain, and we will specify that in, I think, almost all models that I just presented in the framework. And then after that, we will, in the years after, finalize the proof of concept, have then stakeholder feedback from you on this proof of concept. We hope to learn a lot about it and then improve the model framework, and at the same time then broaden the whole analysis to all the other industrial sectors. And there, of course, we also would like to have interaction with academics, but also the industry associations in the process industry to get these models as good as possible. And then, of course, not to forget policymakers. Next slide. That was my last slide.
Thank you. I will take over from here, Ton. So my name is Dinju. I'm from Dechema. We're located in Germany, and we're a hub of an interdisciplinary network, especially for chemical engineering and biotechnology. And within AMIGDALA, I'm the lead on the expertise for data. So let me tell you a little bit about the state of the art and the challenges which are still here or were there at the beginning of the project. We learned so far a lot about different approaches on modeling, on scenarios, and as you all know, there are many, many models, and all can be used to, or many of them can be used to predict possible transformation pathways towards climate neutrality. And as such, we have many models. The data sets which are used by these models vary across the entire modeling scope and scenario scope, and therefore they might be inconsistent when they want to inter-exchange with each other. Inconsistent could mean that they use different types of unit operations or indistinctive system boundaries. I'm not saying that they are wrong at all. They all work perfectly, but within their own set of assumptions. So if as we've just learned, if we want to integrate all the different models, And Ton already explained that we have a few of them to work together, to have an integrative model. It's very, very important to have data which is harmonized and used in the same way by all of these models. So this is one of the first challenges of the data expertise within the project AMIGDALA. And for this harmonization, which we will tackle within the project, we want to create a library with the different respective feedstock demands. And as we already heard, we know how much can be created, how much can be generated, but is there demand available? We want to create a library for that, and also try to get into all the needs which are there from the modelers, from the scenario team as well. And in the end, the data which is used first within the project and then later on publicly needs to be according to the FAIR principle. FAIR is in findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And as I mentioned, we want to have it for partners and of course for you from the community of practice within the project duration. And then by the end of the project, we'll distribute it via a data explorer, and make it publicly available. So what have we done so far? The current progress, of course, is to get an overview on all the models. So you can see already, I just learned recently that we not only have 8 models, but 9, which were just presented by Ton. And all of these models use similar or the same sets of information, but maybe they can vary within data units, topology, time span, as in which base year do they refer to, how actual or up to date is the data. The models have system boundaries which differ from each other sometimes. And as such, we want to take a look at the data used first, and then of course harmonize the data in the end to be able to link the models with each other. Another part which we will, together with our colleagues from BFI, will be doing within the AMIGDALA project will be to provide historic data for the proof of concept, which was just mentioned. We will start with the plastics sector first, which was just mentioned, and then we will see how the models interact with each other, how the data was already harmonized, if it works, if the models still converge, and so on. And we hope to answer some key questions with this. So the used data by the models so far, and of course the additional maybe historic data which will be provided. How robust are the models, and are they robust enough if we make some small or even larger adjustments and changes? Interchangeability is one of the questions which we would try to challenge somehow. I will try to phrase it like this. We will try to challenge the models if we provide them with a different input data set or other versions of data. Do they still converge? And then of course, one of the questions we try to answer is of course the linkability. So to have an integrated model means that they work with each other. This is something Ton already mentioned, but not only as in do the models connect and work with each other, but can they work based on the same data set. So also within the work of progress, some of the key remaining questions which are still open and how we want to address them is, of course, when we talk about the data sets and harmonizing data sets, which data was used or is being used by the models, and we try to connect them to publicly available databases which are already accessible. You can see here some examples, IEA, Eurostat, which are databases which are information used not to have something sensitive from, for example, chemical parks, from industry partners, and so on. We want to have data which, if we want to provide them to the public in the end from the data explorer, to have this sources of information already publicly available. And of course, when we talk about data comparison of data from the publicly available databases with information which we have gathered from interviews with industrial partners, which we may also receive from information from interviews with you from the community of practice to validate whether the models and the data used in the models are correct, of course. And then, now that I've used the word harmonization a lot of times already, it's not only about the small specific data used by each model, but also for the cross-sectoral usage. And then last but not least, it's very important to highlight as well is the data storage. So we talk about data, where will the data which we store and use and access, how are they stored? Is it private? Is it public? Database? Is it, what about data security? What about protocols which are used to make them accessible? Are also some of the key questions which we will answer within the project from the data expertise. Yeah, and as such, we hope to invite you also from the community of practice to look at it with us, to get at the data which is used by the dashboards, by the data explorers, and then also invite you to take a look together with us on harmonization and validation, and which is something we will do in the next few months, but also the next years. So key steps for this year is to have this validation of data ready and done. And then in the next years to have a first draft of this data explorer, which I already mentioned, to first be available internally and for the community of practice. And then the end of 2026 to have a harmonization between all models, of course, not only the models, but also the scenario and pathways. So please keep in mind, although I was the last to present the expertise, we're also first, so to say. Judith already mentioned in her slides, we will work in a cycle not only from the industrial point of view, but also within the project. So early steps of data management will be and is crucial for this project, as it determines a common playground for data from the data point of view for models and scenarios. And if you were involved within the community of practice, we will have even more eyes to look on lesser known aspects regarding information used. Yeah, as I mentioned, I was just the last from the expertise leads. What about the next steps in general from the project? And for this, I will hand over to Joel.
Thank you very much, Din, and good morning to all. So I'm Joel Neve, I'm a senior manager at Deloitte, and as you've seen, we've brought you through the project, which is quite a complex project, requires multiple data points, information, etc., which seeks to inform what the future of the process industry looks like in Europe. And as you've understood, we need to build a community of practice which provides us soundboard information, views, and validates as well key steps around the project. So what I'm going to tell you really is a call for action, which really consists in saying, please join our community of practice. And you've heard throughout the different presentations on the expertise lead why we need you, what we will engage you on, with the view that we have today. But I just want to tell you in a more general sense what this community of practice is about and what it means. So really, this community of practice will make sure that we're answering your questions, that we're meeting your needs, that we're doing so in a way that allows you to discuss in an intelligent and more detailed fashion what the impacts on your companies, on your industry, what the choices are as policymakers that you make together, as well as bringing together. So we're thinking about we want to bring together 4 types of stakeholders: industry associations and companies, academic experts, because we want to make sure that we're building on the best available information, the cutting edge research, bringing our models and data together, policymakers, because ultimately we're trying to answer questions which are policy options for European, national, local, and even regional policymakers, and non-governmental associations to have your views as well on how we should steer the project, bring it on board and make sure that it's useful for the whole of society. So this is who we're targeting. And the point here, really very simply, is join our community of practice, contribute your views, come and work with us on this project. To note that the way we will bring it together is we will plan to do 1 workshop per year, where we will bring forward the key results. We will ask for your feedback and consultation. We will also set up key questions around which to work all together. So it's not going to be particularly constraining. on your certainly already busy agendas. There's no cost. And of course, we're also compliant with GDPR rules. So please join us, help us in shaping this project and providing your views, help us in understanding better what the pathways towards achieving the Green Deal objectives in the European process industry are, what it means for you, and how we can all bring this together in a progressive and useful and constructive manner. To do this, very simply, Rocio has shared the link within the chat. You can go to our website and provide your information. We will also keep you updated with a quarterly newsletter. And for your information, the key next steps from the perspective of the community of practice is that we will set up a workshop around late September, maybe early October. We're still discussing the date, where we will show you further progress. We will show you where we stand on the decision-making framework, and we will seek to have your views and feedback on this. And then we will share also some insights and have discussions on different aspects of the project. So please sign up. Please help us in steering this project in a way that it provides you with answers to your questions. And do keep an eye out both for our newsletters when you signed up, and the save the date for the workshop we will hold late September, early October, likely in Brussels. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you everyone for your presentations. Yeah, I was spamming all the participants with the community of practice link, but it's also on the website and on social media. I have one question, and this is for Toon from Yelena, if I say her name correctly. Thank you for a clear overview. I was wondering, on a local level product, do you include relate to the models of trade-offs between circularity and other qualities related to, for example, safety cost?
Yes, indeed. The idea is that we are going to explore all kinds of trade-offs, especially in the fields of circularity, energy, costs, CO2, and the other environmental impacts. And we're going to explore what kind of key performance indicators relate the best to that. But these are the fields. And we are going to explore the trade-offs in detail there. Yelena mentioned safety. That is one difficult one for our models. So we're not going to be able to have all the trade-offs, and I think safety is a difficult one.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I also wanted to tell you, to all the participants, that that the final video will be available on the website and on social media, and also the presentation, because people were asking for the slides. So it's going to be available on the website. And I am sharing also the social media accounts on the chat, so you can follow our project. And if any one of you don't have any other question, I think this is the end for our webinar. And yeah, I want to thank you again for joining us this morning. This is the link for the website and the handle names for the social media accounts. And yeah, if you have any other question that maybe you want to think about these days, this is our email. You can write to us and we can redirect to every other partner. And yeah, I think that'll be all. Thank you so much again for your time. And please join the community of practice, because this will be very helpful for us. And thank you to all the speakers.